Shanah Tovah, everyone. Shanah Tovah, Shanah Tovah. For those of you I have not yet had the pleasure to meet, my name is Rabbi Rachel, and on behalf of myself and Rabbi Jim and Cantor Lois, I welcome you to Worship and Study Minyan here at Epworth Church. We are so grateful to be hosted by Pastor Mitch and his wife, and it's a real pleasure to get to have this open, big, beautiful space in general, and specifically at a time where getting to have some space can be very helpful. A gentle reminder, if you're not up... No, but the real reminder is that if you're not up here speaking or davening, to please keep your mask on so that everybody can feel safe to be here. And I just also want to welcome those who are joining us virtually. We're so grateful to have tech support because it turns out that rabbis need tech support these days. It is a real machaya, a real gift to have somebody else holding that piece. So thank you to the team here at the church who does that. And yeah, we're grateful to those who are joining us via live stream. And so we hope that whether you're here in the room or tuning in, that you will join us in singing and be able to be part of this evening in a way that feels good for you. So we will start by lighting the Yontif candles, and I would love for Petra to come up to lead us in that.
Amen.
It's good to have some candlelight here with us this evening. Oh. Even though we're here, it's hard to believe we're here, to be honest. I'm ready, but not ready, if that makes any sense to anybody. I imagine some of you might feel the same way. And yeah, it's just always such an amazing moment to think back about where we were this time last year. And I feel, especially because of the pandemic, my sense of time, at least, is pretty much non-existent these days. And so the reflecting backwards is even a little bit harder, but all the more meaningful. And I know I can speak for myself and Rabbi Jim to say that we're grateful for all the patience that folks have had over the year with all of the ups and downs and all arounds, and just that we both have a lot of gratitude for being here with everybody. So thank you all for not only being here, but all the different ways that you each make this minyan happen. It's a real gift. So we will begin with a little kavanah, a little just intention for our time together this evening. So I invite you to get grounded in your seat, maybe take a deep breath, close your eyes, whatever feels meaningful for you to really arrive here this evening. Makor Chaim, source of light, source of life. Let your light and your truth emerge as we begin the new year. Allow us to review our actions and our deeds with compassion and honesty, to recall the moments of joy and the moments of sorrow, the days of trouble and the days of celebration. Give us the courage to face our failings and our fears, and to renew our relationship with you and our community and our tradition and our loved ones. Let this coming year be filled with sweetness and life, with prosperity and good health, with renewal and peace among all peoples. May we find the strength to face the challenges ahead and the wisdom and gratitude to acknowledge our blessings. So may it be your will. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Please join me in a responsive reading on page 3 in the red Machzor, the red prayer book. It's entitled, Now is the Time for Turning. To everything there is a season, and there is an appointed time for every purpose under heaven. The seasons change, as does the balance of day and night. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. From callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love. From carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. And turn us towards each other, God, for in isolation there is no life. We go from here into Mariv in just a moment, and I just want to take one more minute to say that prayer means so many different things to different people and can be easy and hard at different times for different reasons. And I just really want to honor that, of course, there are always the words that are in the prayer book, and there are the words that are inside of us. So if you find yourself at a moment where either one of those is not working for you, you have my full permission, and really everyone's in the room, to try something different. This time you're here because you chose to be, so it is my sincerest hope that you can find an entry point that really works for you. We will turn to page 5 to begin the evening service, and I invite you to rise in body and or in spirit for the Baruch prayer.
There are some parts of the Mariv service that you can participate in, so please do, like at the beginning here.
Seated. On this Rosh Hashanah, which our sages call the birthday of the world, we celebrate the ongoing work of creation in this first blessing before the Shema. Please join us in English. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, ruler of time and space, who brings the evening's dusk, whose wisdom opens the gates of dawn, whose understanding changes the day's division, whose will sets the succession of seasons and arranges the stars in their place in the sky, who creates day and night, who rolls light before darkness and darkness from light, who makes day pass into night, who distinguishes day from night. Adonai Tzivaot is your name, living and ever-present God, May your rule be with us forever and ever. Baruch atah Adonai, who brings each evening's dusk.
Umavir yom, umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzevot shemo, El chai v'kayam, Tamidim loch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim.
Amen. We continue on page 6 with the Shema.
No, top of page 6.
Oh, thank you. The top of page 6. We can have
Okay.
Thank you, Lois.
Ki hem chayenu ve'orech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla ve'havatcha al tasir mimenu li'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Amo Israel,
Amen.
Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha, u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol me'odecha. V'hayu hadavarim ha'ela, Asher Anochi Mitzavacha Hayom Al Levavecha, Vishinantam Levanecha, Vidibarta Bam, Vishivtecha Vavetecha, Uvalechtecha Vaderech, Uvishachbecha Vakumecha, Ukshartam Laot Al Yadecha, Vahayula Totafot Beninecha, Uktaftam Al Mezuzot Betecha, Uvisha Arecha. V'hayam Shema, V'tishmel Tzotah Asher Nachim Tzaver.
We continue quietly on the bottom of page.
Vayomer Adonai al Moshe lemor daber over Israel Yamarta lehem v'yasu lahem tzitzit. V'chayel lechem letzitzit. Leman tiskoru v'tzitem akol mitzvotar v'idem. Liot lechem. Adonai Elohechem emet.
Continue quietly on the bottom of page 7. Please join Cantor Welber in singing Mi Chamocha in the middle of page 8.
Okay, everybody. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedor v'kodesh, norot hilot osei v'ele, malchut achoru v'necha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, ze V'yameru Adonai yimlok le'olam v'ne'emar kifada Adonai את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Amen. We'll do a prayer for peace on page 9. Please join me in English on the left-hand side, and we'll read responsively. Allow us, Adonai, our God, to sleep peacefully and to waken again to life, our sovereign. Shield us, remove us from enemies and pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow, and remove the evil forces that surround us. Ensure our going and our coming for life and peace now and forever. Baruch Ata Adonai, who spreads the canopy of peace over us, over all the people Israel, and over Jerusalem.
Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha Baruch ata Adonai haporei sukkot shalom aleinu v'yakol amo Yisrael v'yal Yerushalayim.
Amen. Please rise. It is available to you to join me in English at the top of page 10. Sound the shofar on our feast day, on the new moon when it is hidden, for it is Israel's law, a decree of the God of Jacob.
Tigahu v'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu ki chok l'Yisrael mishpat l'Elohei Yaakov.
You may be seated. So after Cantor Welber chants the Chatzi Kadesh, we will move into the silent Amidah. And of course, as I said earlier, please feel free to connect with the words that are on the page of the prayer book or the words that are inside of you. And I am just going to share a few words, another brief kavanah, a brief intention before we enter into the Amidah prayer. So I want to share a blessing, some words from Rabbi Alan Liu, Zichrono Livracha. May his name be remembered for a blessing, something that really, really speaks to me that I hope will resonate with at least some of you. So there's a line in the Amidah, Chulam Agudat Echat. And Rabbi Liu translates this phrase as a single spiritual unit. And in his book, which is very popular among the very nerdy rabbi crowd in which I travel, that's around this time of year, it's called This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared. Yes, a very apt title for this time of year. He writes that the first thing that we do on the high holidays is to come together before God as this single spiritual unit. That's what you're all doing here tonight. Maybe you didn't think of it exactly in that way, but that's how he conceives of it. And that we do this out of a very deep instinct, that we need each other, that this is not a solo event at all. And here he says, in the full flush of reality of the life and death nature of this ritual, in this way that we recognize our impotence as individuals to meet this most earnest and urgent emergency, our need for each other is very immense. It's huge even. And that just by the act of being together, even if we were to say nothing, which is very uncommon, I know, in a room full of Jews, but if we were to say nothing, that there's something intrinsically healing about just coming together. And he says that the act of coming together, that it gives each of us hope. And so here we are on this night, this first night of Rosh Hashanah, the first night of the new year, as this Agudat Echat, this single spiritual unit, together in this room and live streaming in from various places. And my hope is that being together in this way, that it helps us to really acknowledge what our ancient kind of spiritual technology is, that this medicine that we're being given to heal ourselves is somewhat as simple as coming together. And he closes his thoughts about this by saying, which is very in tune with the name of the title of the book, that this experience that we're having together is real, that it's very, very real, and it's absolutely inescapable. And here we are utterly unprepared, and that we have nothing to offer but our broken hearts, and that will be enough. And so I invite each of us into that enoughness tonight of what it means to just be here together and to be here with the parts of our hearts that are broken and to feel the power that can come from just being together. So with that, I invite you, if you are able, to rise, and we will begin with the Chatzi Kaddish on page 10.
Yikadol v'yikadash merabah Yomad yivarach yirutei V'yamlich malchutei V'chayechon u'v'yomechon U'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael B'gala U'v'zaman koriv V'yimaru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba mevarach leolam. Yomi yomaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach. V'yitpar, v'yitromam, v'yitnosei. V'yitador, v'yitolal, Shemei dekudeshah. Leila, min kol v'chata v'shirata, tush v'chata v'nechemata, damiran v'yalva v'maru, amen.
If you're still davening the Amidah, this is not meant to interrupt you. Please stay on your own path. We're going to begin with Kaddish Shalem on page 19, and we will join up shortly if you are somewhere else. I have full faith. So if you are able to rise in body or spirit, we will continue on page 19.
There are traditional ways to do this Kaddish. There are several. And I'm going to pick the one that is most, to me, uplifting and participatory. So if you can join along, please. Yitgadal v'yitkadosh shemei Rabbah v'yalema divrach chirutei v'yamlich malachutei v'chaychon u'v'yom echon u'v'chayedech o Beit Yisrael b'gala u'v'zaman kariv v'imaru amen Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach Le'olam u'le'amei olamaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha prichu le'ela u'le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yalema Tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yalema v'imaru Tikabal salodahon uvaudahon necho Beit Yisrael kadamavuhon v'vishamay ya v'imaru amen yesh lama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imaru Oseh shalom b'maromav Oseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imaru amen.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You may be seated, and I would love for you to join me in English and on page 23 and reading a brief meditation. It's on the bottom in English on the left-hand side, right under the word meditation. In your great kindness, aid us, Adonai, our God, to embrace this Rosh Hashanah with love and overwhelming joy as a gift from you. Through the celebration of this sacred Rosh Hashanah, may we attain a full and true faith. Help us to gather together the sparks of holiness within ourselves as we join with all the people Israel congregating from their individual homes and joining together on these holy days of Rosh Hashanah to bless your sacred name. So we turn to page 24, and Cantor Lois is going to recite the Kiddush, the blessing over the wine for us. After that, we will get to hear some words of Torah from Rabbi Jim, and then we will do Aleinu Mourner's Kaddish. So just to give you a little bit of idea of where we are and where we're going.
Think you rise for this?
Yes, thank you. Please rise if you're able on page 24.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'romemanu mikol hashon v'kiddeshanu v'mitzvotav v'hatiten lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'yahava et yom hazikaron hazeh yom teruah mikra kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim ki vonu v'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol hamim u'devarecha emet v'kayam lad. Baruch atah Adonai melech al kol haaretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom hazikaron. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Beautiful. Amen, amen. Thank you, Cantor Lois. And Rabbi Jim, do you want this spot?
Shanah Tovah. I want to thank everyone who is here, first of all, and also thank Harvard Hillel for all of their support, Rabbi Rachel and Lois for a beautiful Ma'ariv service, and of course the ushers and Pastor Mitch for taking care of us, and Mike taking care of us tonight. I really appreciate everyone's support. The high holidays arrive this year at a particularly tumultuous time, with news about ever-multiplying threats to our democracy, ongoing assaults on women's right to bodily autonomy, escalating repression of LGBTQ citizens, and other things, too many to name around here. Internationally, we are witnessing the probable election of a hard right-wing government in Italy, renewed unrest and violent repression in Iran, nuclear saber rattling and from the Russian leader in regards to his disastrous criminal war in Ukraine, and beyond all national divisions, unchecked climate change. I hesitated even to enumerate these items, not only because it's such a bummer, but also because I am aware that I would definitely omit multiple high priority items. really, where do we start? And I think we better start praying. And I'll just point out in our Machzor on page 22, there's a little excerpt from a Sephardic piyut, Tichle Shanah v'killoteha, Tachel Shanah uvirchoteha. May this year's troubles end and a year of blessing begin. So Kenny Ratzon, let's hope that is the case. Of course, all of these large-scale worries are happening against the backdrop of things that we are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. The ongoing pandemic, despite what our president says, we know it's still happening. Inflation in the grocery store, and the frightening rise in anti-Semitism locally as well as nationally. The pandemic is what I'll focus on just for a moment. It continues to affect the life not only in our communities, but in this community, in this minyan. Several of our usual members are participating from home tonight, as they will throughout the holidays. This hesitation to be among people indoors also affects our weekly minyan. Our attendance is down considerably from what we enjoyed before COVID made its appearance. These are real challenges. Yet we, as Rachel already mentioned, we are gathering tonight, whether we are here in person or we are participating remotely from our homes. This is a bracing reminder that we as Jews still feel the obligation, the need, the joy of gathering in community on sacred occasions, even if we can't necessarily do it in our accustomed fashion. We gather to reaffirm our connection to the community, our identity as Jews, our need to mark and ideally to celebrate the new year collectively as well as in our families. Even more of us will gather tomorrow to hear the shofar, and more still will assemble next week to hear the chanting of Kol Nidre at the beginning of Yom Kippur. And some of us, perhaps, maybe we came to pray, as Rachel has already mentioned. And again, whatever we mean by that verb. Abraham Joshua Heschel defines it this way: to pray is to take notice of the wonder, to regain a sense of the mystery that animates all beings, the divine margin in all attainments. Less lofty, perhaps, but no less real, is the idea that we pray when we have a strong need or a strong want. Anne Lamott, the novelist, captures both of these ideas in her pithy formulation. She defines prayer with 3 words: help, thanks, wow. Our forms of prayer, that our prayer can take are manifold. Sometimes it is just to listen to the music, to hear Cantor Lois send the words of our liturgy up towards heaven to crown the divine. Or if we're not comfortable with that vertical metaphor, we can say that she sends them deep into our souls to revitalize us. Other times, we recite the words of our traditional liturgy to find resonance in the familiar formulations of the Hebrew that Jews have read for generations, or in the fresh translations of this beautiful Machzor. At still other times, prayer is found simply in the act of gathering, whether in the synagogue or at a protest or in feeding the hungry. To extend Heschel's metaphor, it is very possible to pray not only, as he would put it, with our feet, but also with our hands and with our compassion. And finally, there is the act of just talking to God, whatever our idea of God is, the act of pouring out our soul and expressing our deepest fears, our needs, and our longing. For many of us, this is the hardest form of prayer, to move beyond the music, beyond the printed words, beyond the work of justice into the pure realm of the soul. In this context, I was wondering about the status of prayer among the skills that humans acquire and shed as we grow from children into adults. Is it just a more or less natural part of human development, like walking or the use of language, that most people simply acquire? The ability to pray, and we just never fully lose it, even if, like many Jews, we only use it, say, a few times a year in any kind of a formal sense. Or is it more like riding a bicycle, something that at some point you need to learn, whether from a parent or on your own initiative. But once you've learned, you can reliably pick it up again, even after a long hiatus. Or maybe it's more like art or music, something that most children tend to be able to do with enthusiasm, at least until they begin to realize that someone, whether peers or a teacher or a parent, seems to have the opinion that their art or their singing is not very good, and maybe they are doing it wrong and they should stop. And that ends their enjoyment of it. My guess is that each of these scenarios describes the experience of certain people and not others. And I also imagine that they are not exhaustive. And I also guess that based on conversations I've had with several people, many people, that many Jews are fairly convinced that whatever they are doing when they are trying to pray, they are doing it wrong. Because I'm me, I feel the urge to assure everyone that they are not doing it wrong. But because I have a fair amount of experience, I know that very few people will believe me. So I'm going to talk instead about Hannah, or Hannah. Hannah, as you may know, is the mother of Shmuel, the prophet Samuel, who anoints first Saul and then David. I have to confess that I am not very fond of Samuel, and I'm very glad that I named my kid Samson and not Samuel. He lacks compassion. He has some unfortunate prejudices about what makes for a good king, and he carries a nasty grudge. But Hannah I'm very fond of, not only for her nobility in the face of abuse from her co-wife Peninnah, but also for her gifts as a speaker and for the amazing confidence she has in her deep connection with God. Most likely, the rabbis chose the story of Hannah and her sister wife Peninnah as the Haftarah for the first day of Rosh Hashanah because of its echoes with the Torah portion. Like the story of Sarah and Hagar, the story of Hannah foregrounds female characters and their relationships, even if both stories ultimately concern the miraculous birth of an important male figure. But for my purposes, Hannah offers a masterclass in the art of prayer. So let me read from the Haftarah itself, which you can find. I know you have one of these books. It's on page 108, if you feel like following along. We'll begin on page 108, but verse 9. After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose. The priest Eli was sitting at the seat near the doorpost of the temple of Adonai. In her wretchedness, she prayed to Adonai, weeping all the while, and she made this vow, "O Adonai Tzevaot, if you will look upon the suffering of your maidservant and will remember me and not forget your maidservant, and if you will grant your maidservant a male child, I will dedicate him to Adonai for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever touch his head." As she kept on praying before Adonai, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, "How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Sober up." And Hannah replied, "Oh no, my lord, I am a very unhappy woman. I have drunk no wine or other strong drink, but I have been pouring out my heart to Adonai. Do not take your maidservant for a worthless woman. I have only been speaking all this time out of my great anguish and distress." "Then go in peace," said Eli, "and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked." She answered, "You are most kind to your handmaid." So the woman left, and she ate, and she was no longer downcast. In verse 10, we see that Hannah is bitter of soul, full of tears, and that she prays not so much to Adonai. You can't see it in the translation, but in the original, but onto Adonai. Vatitpalel al Adonai. In Talmud Brachot 31b, Rabbi Elazar claims that this preposition indicates that Hannah spoke impertinently to God. Her prayer, I find, is assertive, aggressive even, making a vow and promising that the son will never cut his hair. Like Samson, he is to be a Nazir. even though it is entirely improper for a parent to make that vow on behalf of their child. But as we see from the story, God does not reject Hannah's prayer, does not reproach her for her chutzpah, but fulfills her request. And in the Talmud, Hannah's impertinence puts her in company with Elijah and with Moses, not too shabby for a character who makes only a single appearance in the Tanakh. Maybe we should be audacious in our prayers. We should ask for the seemingly impossible, even if our experience and our rational selves know that such a request is impossible. As Hannah's psalm later in the Haftarah makes clear, and you'll see this tomorrow, you can look at it now if you feel like it, reversals of fortune and the elevation of the weak over the strong are Adonai's stock in trade. As I was contemplating this Haftarah, I could not help but think of the situation in Ukraine. In the spring, the war seemed imminent, and images of Ukrainian civilians training with wooden mock-ups of rifles filled the newspapers. I was sure, as I was, and I'm sure most people were also, that the war would be brief. The Ukrainians, we might have said, didn't have a prayer. Yet we have seen what has happened. I'm not saying, mind you, that God has intervened in this war. Ukraine's success has come from their consciousness as a sovereign nation, the relative sophistication of their tactics, and the strategic delivery of weapons from the Western allies. And I have to say that I'm not even sure, despite the biblical insistence that only God can make a woman fertile, that God intervened to bring Hannah a baby. The prayer itself bolstered her, and then she went home and had sex with her husband. Pray, to be sure, but also do what you need to do to attain your desired outcome. I also want to point out, as my teacher, Rabbi Art Green, does in Kol HaNeshama, which is the Reconstructionist Machzor, that in verse 10, Hannah gives God a new name, Adonai Tzevaot, not translated, as you may have noticed, in our Machzor. In Kol HaNeshama, it is translated, Creator of the multitudes of heaven. In more typical translations, it appears as the Lord of hosts. But for Hannah, as Rabbi Green suggests, it seems to indicate that not only the angels and the stars, it is not only the angels and the stars, but also all of human creation as well. Looking at the same place in Tractate Brachot, we read, Rabbi Elazar said, from the day that the Holy One, blessed be God, created the world, there was no person who called the Holy One, blessed be God, Adonai Tzevaot, until Hannah came and called God Adonai Tzevaot. Rabbi Elazar explains that Hannah said before the Holy One, blessed be God, Ribono Shel Olam, are you not Adonai Tzevaot? And of all the hosts and hosts of creation that you have created in your world, is it too much in your eyes to grant me just one son? For Hannah, she surveys all of creation and insists that she be allowed to participate in that creation, not simply passively be a part of it. For me, I am struck that this name of God is among the first that I ever learned. Early in my Jewish journey, I was mostly a Friday night Jew, and so I would struggle to pronounce the first blessing before the Shema in the evening service. And we read it this morning. We read it in English, but you can go back to page 5 if you want to see it. There we see the creation of the heavens and the regulation of day and night, and we call God, as Hannah does, Adonai Tzevaot, Lord of creation or Lord of hosts. Certainly the rabbis who compiled the prayer book were aware of this Talmudic tradition. So in calling on God as Adonai Tzevaot every evening, we are invited to echo Hannah, to insist that even as God is forever renewing creation, so too we have a part in that responsibility. Finally, we see that Hannah's prayer, although fully articulated in her mind and in her heart, it is silent. In verse 13, we read, only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. And Eli the priest, seeing this, assumed that Hannah was drunk and rebuked her. Oh no, my lord, she says, I am a very unhappy woman. I have drunk no wine or other strong drink. but I have been pouring out my heart to Adonai. I have only been speaking all this time out of my great anguish and distress. As you likely know, the rabbis point to Hannah's silence as an indication that we should not pray our individual Amidah prayers out loud. We call it the silent Amidah. I certainly will not disagree with that, but I want to emphasize that whether we're talking about the statutory Amidah prayer or simply the anguish and distress of our own heart, both are worthy of God's attention as well as the respect of those around us, whether they purport to be holy men like Eli or simple people like the rest of us. And they deserve, I would say as well, our own respect. If we are pouring out our heart, if we are sincerely trying to express the longing of our soul, we simply cannot do it wrong. Over the course of this next 10 days, we have the opportunity to review our internal record for the year, to reach out to people that we feel we might have wronged, whether this year or in a previous year. The statute of limitations doesn't prevent us, in hopes of making amends, and to reach inward to identify the deepest aspirations and hopes for the coming year. Alongside all of that, we have the opportunity to come together in prayer, to sing and to listen, to recite the ancient liturgy, and to create new prayers as we move through these days of awe together. May our prayers be chutzpahdik. May we participate fully in the work of creation, and may we bring the fullness of our souls to this work. And finally, may those prayers give us the strength and the joy we need to address the endless challenges we face in this troubled world. Ken Yireh Ratzon. Please accept my blessing for Shanah Tovah u'metuka, a sweet and a full new year.
Yasher Koach, Rabbi Jim, thank you so much for sharing those words of Torah with us. I love a good call for being chutzpahdik. It's very important. And sometimes we all need permission. So we will continue from those words of Torah to the end of our time together this evening. If you're able in body or spirit to rise, we will turn to page 25 for the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach, l'adon hakol, l'atei gedula liotze breshit, shelo sanu k'gei haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishpechot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korein u'mishtachavim Lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Shem netushim rav yosef rosh moshav v'karov hashemam yimalish. Eino David. Al kein nekavel lekaron Eloheinu lirot meher v'ter. Ki al malchutecha chil me'atim loch v'chavod. Kakatu v'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'nemar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol ha'aretz, b'yom ha'hu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
We will continue with the Mourner's Kaddish. I honor that people have different traditions about standing or sitting. Please do whatever is most important to you. And if you are currently in mourning or you're commemorating a yortzeit, and you would like to share the name of that person, Rabbi Jim is going to kind of do a point and sweep around the room, and happy to have those names brought into the room this evening before we begin with Mourner's Kaddish on page 26.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabah.
Amen.
Bialama divra chirute v'yamlich malchute. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chaye dechol be'Yisrael. V'agala u'v'zman kariv yimaru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shemei rabah mevarach li'olam u'li'omei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit adar v'yit alev v'yit halal. Shemei dekudsha Brichu. Leila u'leila min kol berchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran bi'alma v'imaru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imaru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imaru. Amen.
Amen. You may be seated if you're standing. We will move from here to Psalm 27, which is the literal psalm of this season that begins to be recited at the beginning of the month of Elul, which we have just moved out of, and is recited all the way through Sukkot. And so we'll have a few moments to read through the psalm on our own, and then Kentor Lewis will lead us in Achal Sha'alti, which is the bolded line, kind of, a handful of lines, like towards the top of the page. So we're on page 27 with Psalm 27.
Adonai orivishi mimi, Adonai me'osai mimi, efchad bekro, alai mereim lechol epesara, etzarek. Ashir Yisrael Adonai Shema Adonai Kuli Akraf Hanini V'Anini L'Cha Maril Bik V'Kish Al Tastermina Al Tad B'Av Avdecha V'Esati Al Tiksheni V'Al Tasveni Elohei Shiki Avivimi Yasavuni V'Adonai Yasveni Orein Adonai Darkecha Unheini B'Orat Mishtar L'An Al Tiksheni Kikam Lulehem Anti L'Rok B'Tu Adonai B'Eretz Chaim Kaveh El Adonai Chazak V'Ametz Libecha V'Kaveh El Adonai Ochal She'alti Me'et Adonai Ota Avakesh Ochal She'alti Me'et Adonai Ota Avakesh Shifti Beit Adonai Kol Yemei Chayai Lachazot Ben Noam Adonai Uvaker B'Hechalo Lachazot Ben Noam Adonai Uvaker B'Hechalo.
Now it's time for announcements. And I realized that I didn't remember to ask who's doing announcements. Rabbi Jim, you're going to do it?
Tomorrow morning we'll gather here at 9 o'clock. Hope to see you bright and early, or not so bright and not so early. But 9 o'clock tomorrow, and just to be reminded, there's no second-day service with worship and study. There are other options if you need help finding options for the second day. Please ask me after.
Best, briefest announcements ever. Good job. We continue on page 28, and we'll conclude our Ma'ariv service tonight with Yigdal.
And again, this melody I choose for Yigdal is the traditional nusach for this holiday, for the Yigdal. They're doing it in mainstream synagogues all over, so I'm not out of step here. Yigdal Elohim chai ve'yishtabach nimsa ve'ened el metziuto echad ve'en yachid ke'ichudo ne'elam ve'gam ein sof li'achduto ein lo demut haguf ve'ein no guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato Kadmon lechol davar אשר נברא ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו. הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר, יורה גדולתו ומלכותו, שפע נבואתו נתנו אל אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו. לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד, נביא ומביט את אמונתו. תורת אמת נתן לעמו אל, יד נביאו נאמן ביתו. לא יחליף האל ולא ימיר דתו, לעולמים לזולתו. צופה ויודע סתורנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומר לאיש חסד כמפעלו, נותן לרשע רע כרישתו. ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחכה קץ ישועתו. מתים יחיה ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדייר שם תהילתו. מתים יחיה ברוב חסדו, ברוך הדייר שם תהילתו. Shanah
Thank you
Tovah.
so much, Cantor Lois. Shanah Tovah, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. And please, if you haven't met either myself or Cantor Lois or Rabbi Jim, feel free to introduce yourselves, or if we can get to you before you leave, we're happy to introduce ourselves to you. So again, Shanah Tovah.